Jonelle Matthews went missing just 5 days before Christmas. What happened to Janelle? Who is responsible for her disappearance? Let's find out. I'm Brandy and this is Killer Bites. Janelle's story actually led to one of the first faces of missing children to appear on a milk carton. It's a heartbreaking and rather strange case that turned the town of Greeley, Colorado upside down. Jonelle Matthews went missing from her home 5 days before Christmas in 1984 and was never seen again. Janelle was born February 9, 1972 in Santa Barbara, California to a 13-year-old mother named Terry Martinez. Shortly after giving birth, Terry, who was just a child herself, decided to give her daughter a chance at a better life and put her up for adoption. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, California, a happy couple named Jim and Gloria Matthews had plans to build a family of their own. After the birth of their first daughter, Jennifer Matthews, they tried for a second baby, but were not successful in the pregnancy. That's when they looked into adoption and found a beautiful baby girl and named her Jonelle Matthews. Jim and Gloria never kept the fact that Janelle was adopted from her, but always told her that she was their chosen child. No one could tell she was adopted because she looked just like her mother, Gloria. Several years later, the family moved from California to Greeley, Colorado. Jim was an elementary school principal, Gloria was a waitress, and they were faithful members of the Sunnyview Church of Nazarene. Their daughter, Jennifer, was 2.5 years older than her sister, Janelle, and was one of the teammates on her school basketball team. Janelle was very active in school and loved to sing, dance, and perform in school productions. Days leading up to her disappearance, she was preparing for her middle school Christmas choir concert, but she got a cold and was instructed by her parents to stay home and rest. Even though she was ill, she begged her parents to let her go to school to perform in the concert and to also have the chance to give out the handmade Christmas gifts she had made for her friends. Jim and Gloria allowed her to attend the concert, with the exception that she had to come straight home to rest. On December 20th, 1984, the entire Matthews family had an agenda that evening. Gloria was on her way to the airport to fly back to Los Angeles to surprise her parents for Christmas because her father was ill and not doing well. Janelle's sister, Jennifer, was at school preparing for a basketball game that evening that her father, Jim, would be attending. Janelle was dropped off by her father at her middle school for her Christmas choir concert that evening. The concert didn't have a live audience as it was being video recorded and set to televise on the local cable channel that holiday. After the show was over, Janelle's best friend, Deanna Ross, and her father, Russell Ross, gave her a ride home. Once they arrived at 8:15 p.m., Janelle went inside and flickered the lights on and off. This was the usual signal to her friends to let them know she had made it inside all right. Shortly after 8:30 p.m., Janelle answered a phone call from a teacher at Jim's school and wrote down the message for her father. That was the last time anyone ever heard from Janelle again. Well, with the exception of one other individual. Jim Matthews arrived home at 9:30 p.m. to find the house empty. Yet it felt as if Janelle had just been there. Her shoes were there by the couch, the television was left on, and so was the space heater. Jennifer arrived home at 10 p.m., and Jim asked her if she knew where Janelle was, but she had no idea. Jim called the Ross family to see if she went home with them or if they knew where she was, but sadly, they didn't know either. He even called the church, but the pastor told him to hang up and call the police. The police arrived at the residence around 11 p.m. and proceeded into the investigation around the house and the neighborhood. Police assumed it was a runaway situation and that she would show up in the following days, but Jim knew she wouldn't run away. What child would run away before Christmas? The only hard evidence they found were footprints in the snow surrounding the home, as if someone was peeking in through the windows. One thing that was not made public was that the person responsible for the footprints had attempted to cover them up with a rack. That bit of information is important to note when we meet one of our suspects, a 3-decade-old missing puzzle piece to her disappearance. They were able to identify that it was Janelle by the braces on the skull's teeth that she had received earlier the year she went missing in 1984. The clothing that was covering her remains was was the outfit she wore to the Christmas choir concert on the last night she was seen. After examination, it was clear that the skull had a penetrating bullet hole wound to the forehead. The forensic report listed Janelle's cause of death as a gunshot wound to the head. The Greeley Police Department never forgot about Janelle, and for decades, the officers lived in torment over the possibilities of what may have occurred that grim evening. Even though there was no DNA evidence of who could have been responsible for this evil crime, there was one man who stuck out after all these years: Stephen Dana Panky. It was as if he had paraded around thinking he was too smart and above the law to ever get caught, but it was his strange obsession with the case that made him suspect number one. A few years after Janelle's disappearance, Steve Panky and his family moved around to different states before settling in Idaho. There he found an interest in politics. He ran for sheriff 3 times, municipal council, lieutenant governor, and even governor twice. He was never elected. He claimed to have known information about the girl's disappearance from a confession he heard when he was a youth pastor at a church, which was later found to be a lie because Panky was never a youth pastor. Panky was once a member of the same church as the Matthews family, but was excommunicated because of a sexual assault charge. Detective Cash asked the Matthews family if they knew of a Stephen Panky, but the family had never heard of him. Panky reportedly hated the church and hated authority, despite the fact that he had run for sheriff and governor on multiple occasions in Idaho. Steve Panky inserted himself into the case by asking detectives to share information to see if it matched with what he knew about the case. One thing that struck detectives as odd was his knowledge of the snow footprints that were concealed with a rack from inside the Matthews garage, a detail not revealed by the police to the public. At the time, the detective that was on the case decided that he was a fringe element and didn't deserve any more attention. Despite Panky's calls for attention and his constant teasing of his knowledge of the Janelle case to the authorities, it was ultimately someone very close to him that finally caused the police to take out a search warrant on Panky's residence. That person was his ex-wife, Angela Hicks. Detectives called Angela to get more information about her ex-husband, Panky. She quickly replied with, "Why has it taken you so long to call me?" Angela Hicks had previously gone to police to report her then-husband, Panky, and his odd behavior and obsession about the Jonelle Matthews case. All the reports she had made back in 1985 were lost by the Greeley Police Department, or maybe they weren't taken seriously, because this was news to Detective Cash. Detectives executed the search warrant and confiscated Steve Panky's cell phone and laptop to find that he had searched the Jonelle Matthews case almost daily up until that day. On October 13th, 2020, convinced that Steve Panky was the #1 suspect, police arrested him for the murder and abduction of Jonelle Matthews. Although the prosecution felt confident with his trial, ultimately his case was a challenging one because it relied solely on circumstantial evidence. So challenging, in fact, that on November 4th, 2021, the first trial ended up with a hung jury of 9-3, leading to a mistrial. Prosecutors, however, were able to obtain a new trial on October 4th, 2022, and bring him back to court to try him again, and this time they pulled no stops. They were able to arm themselves with even more evidence, which included a recent confession Steve Panky gave a fellow prisoner he shared a cell with. The prisoner even overheard Panky praying to God, asking for forgiveness for what he did to Janelle. The jury were also able to hear from Stephen Panky's cousin, who told them that she had seen him on several occasions sitting in his car, just blocks from Janelle's school, watching the children walk home. Also, remember his ex-wife, Angela Hicks? She was an integral part of the prosecution, and it was her damning testimony, such as how Panky would physically abuse her, not to mention previously mentioned items such as the burnt car and his constant mentioning of the Janelle case that helped land a conviction. Many people involved with the trial credit her in helping solidify the case against her former husband. On Monday, October 31st, 2022, the jury announced the verdict and found Steve Panky guilty of second-degree kidnapping and felony murder 38 years after this horrible crime against this innocent child. And way too long of a wait for the family of Jonelle Matthews. Matthews. But at least now they finally had closure for their beloved child and knew that the evil person responsible would rot away behind bars. According to the grand jury's indictment, on December 20th, 1984, Mr. Panky, armed with a gun, took Janelle from her family's home and killed her during the course of the kidnapping. Prosecutors argued that while there was no DNA evidence that implicated Mr. Panky in the murder, his own statements and actions throughout the years made him the sole suspect of this case. But what was Stephen Panky's motive in this gruesome crime? We may never know. And that concludes the Jonelle Matthews case. I'm Brandy, and thank you for watching Killer Bites.